Thank you. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Benicia Unified School District's Governing Board special meeting this evening. It is, I'm looking for the date, August 3rd, 6 p.m. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Can we get a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Martinez?
Absolutely. President Zeta.
Here.
Trustee Perucci. Here. Trustee Moss.
Here.
Trustee Maselli.
Here.
And Trustee Grubbs.
Here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item is open session. We did not have a closed session this evening, and I don't believe we have any announcements unless Dr. Young has.
No.
Right?
No announcements.
Okay, no announcements. And I just want to.
Just that it's live streamed.
Okay. I also want to make sure that everybody signs in on the sheet in the back, letting us know that you're here, just in case we need to do contact tracing for this evening. We request your name, address, and telephone number. And we really appreciate that being done. So moving on, we're going to.
Address and email is just fine.
Address and email. Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Okay, moving on, we have to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. All in favor? Or are we doing roll call votes now? Or are we back to not doing that?
Taking roll.
Let's do a roll call.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, President Zeta.
Here.
Trustee Moss.
Or yes, rather.
Yes. Trustee Perucci.
Yes.
Trustee Maselli.
Here.
And Trustee Grubbs.
Here.
Okay, can I ask everybody to, are we good? Yes? I'd like everybody to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. Okay, we have our next item up is 6.1. It's the superintendent's report. So I'm going to invite Dr. Young to speak.
Very good. Thank you, President Zeta. Good evening, trustees and the team. Here we are back together after many months. Our first, in-person board meeting in 14 months or so. So happy to see you in this setting. And I'd like to welcome our guests tonight and appreciate you participating with us on wearing a mask and helping us, identify who you are in case we need to do contact tracing. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Just a couple of things from me. We're excited to be back at it. We know that we're still living in the world of COVID. It's still among us, and we have this challenging new Delta variant, and so we're dealing with that. But I just wanted to stress that we are very excited to be back, and I keep thinking about the details that we need to work through with things, and we will, and we are. But the big deal is we're coming back to full-time in-person instruction. That is a huge move for society, for students, for families. That's a big deal. And so we're happy that that's happening, knowing that we'll continue to work through the challenges that COVID is presenting to us and to society. So tonight we have some presentations. It's an informational board meeting. There's no action items being taken. And some awesome team members on the staff will be talking about recent legislation around independent study. We're talking about our health and safety guidelines. We have a first reading of a board policy that we're required to pass in relation to the new legislation for independent study. And then Mr. Rahill will give us a quick update on the state budget. So we are ready to go, excited to get after it again, and continue to work through things together. We will be ready for your students when we begin the first day of school. A couple of other comments let the public know. I don't know if this is too loud. As part of Measure S, we've got quite a bit of bond work going on throughout the district, in particular at Farmer Elementary and BMS Middle School. We're very excited about that, from earthquake retrofit to modernizing classrooms and bathrooms, HVAC systems, new flooring. So very, very proud of that work. And we always want to, the trustees and I, want to continue to thank the community for passing Measure S, I think, what's that, 7 years ago. So we're making great progress with that. I think you've driven by the middle school, certainly, of late, and it just looks beautiful. And then you're going to see Farmer Elementary really begin to be transformed. So very excited about that process. One other quick thing I wanted to announce, that it is on the website, and I talked about it at the end of last school year, and I will in a communication to the public soon. We'll try to get one out this week, just updating people about things to expect when school starts, is that we have our new start times. I think everybody remembers that. So it's pretty simple. Elementary is 8 o'clock. Middle school is 8:15. High school is 8:30. And the ending times all sort of vary. So you can find those on the website. That information is all there for you. So that being said, again, thanks for being here. Thanks everybody in the public who might be tuning in now. And we look forward to these important informational items tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Next is board reports. And I also want to echo what Dr. Young said about how we appreciate your involvement and getting to know the things that matter most to you and your students. So I don't have anything else to report other than we're excited that everybody's going to go back in person starting in a couple of weeks. And we're really looking forward to the teachers and the kids and getting back to some kind of normalcy. So without further ado, I want to ask my colleagues here if anybody has anything that they would like to add. No? No? Okay, then we are going to move on to item number 7, which is comments from the public. Mrs. Martinez, are there any additional comments besides the 2 I have? Okay, so I'm going to ask Andrew Miller if he wouldn't mind coming up to the podium to speak. Oh, before you speak, you can stand there. But yeah, we changed it a little bit since last year. Benicia Unified School District has moved to in-person board meetings. We ask that members of the public who wish to attend, including those who wish to address the board, wear masks at all times. Members of the public may address the board at a meeting or on any item within the board's jurisdiction. Speaker cards must be completed requesting to address the board and are available at the back table and may be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting. The board president will call the open session public comments to the specific items then being discussed by the board bylaw 9323 during public comment item. The governing board allows speakers to speak at meetings on agendized and non-agendized matters under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during the public comment periods, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. So Andrew Miller, thank you for your patience, but the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Miller. I can talk loud. My name is Andrew Miller, and I am the parent of 2 Benicia District students, a 5-year-old son in kindergarten and a 13-year-old in 8th grade. When the pandemic began, my wife and I were called upon to work in a testing tent and the ER at the hospital to take care of all the people that needed to care, and so we did. In doing so, we were forced to leave our daughter at home alone to do her virtual learning and place our son with various friends. As time went by, our straight A student daughter's grades became worse and worse, and when I asked her about it, she said that she wasn't able to learn anything with the virtual classroom. She also became more and more depressed, eventually having to be hospitalized, and she wasn't the only one. There were so many kids needing help for depression that my daughter was forced to wait in the ER for 3 days until the room could be found for her at a facility located an hour and a half away. If I had it all to do over again, I would have stayed home and taken care of my kids who needed me more than the hospital did. The reason that I mention this is because it forced me to open my eyes to see what was going on with my kids, especially in school. So I began watching your board meetings. I started with the meeting where you decided not to go back to in-person learning, even though there was no reason that I could see for not doing so at that time. This upset me greatly considering what I had been going through with my daughter, and it made me wonder what other kinds of decisions were taking place that I might not agree with, so I listened to more meetings. One of the things that stood out to me was the number of parents that called in to request that teachers be given anti-racist training, that the curriculum represent all ethnic groups and be historically accurate, and that an equity curriculum task force be created. So I asked myself, when did teachers become racist? Did the teachers start teaching the children differently based on the color of their skin since I was last there? What is an equity curriculum? Does history class not include all of the ethnic groups that have made up the United States since before it was even known as such that I learned about in school? So I watched some more of your meetings to try and get a better handle on things. Frankly, it didn't help. I watched your study session with Miss Anderson, and I looked up a ton of definitions that I didn't understand, like LCAP, CCSS, ELD, UDL, NCI, CAASAP, and on in an effort to better understand what was going on until my head was swimming. In the end, I came to the conclusion that it would be easier for me to tell you what I expect for my children's school. I expect that my children will be taught math, science, English, and history. I expect that my children will be treated with respect and that they will treat others with respect in turn. I expect that my children will not be told that they are oppressors or victims because of the color of their skin. I expect the school to refrain from teaching my children anything about sex or gender, as I consider this to be my job. I expect that my kids, and all of the other kids for that matter, will not be used as guinea pigs in some critical race theory experiment or have any social justice warriors try to force their political beliefs on my kids. I will be responsible for teaching morals to my kids. I also expect that the teachers won't be forced to undergo anti-racist or unconscious bias training or any other such nonsense that will distract them from teaching my kids how to think for themselves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Miller. Our next guest will be Mario B.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Mario. A little bit about myself. My family and I, we survived a Marxist communist revolution in Nicaragua back in the 80s, and we came to America as under political asylum. My parents instilled in me that America is a land of opportunity, and with hard work, you can accomplish anything. We believe in a merit-based society. America was built on a merit-based society. I served this country in the military, within one generation, I went from poverty to a comfortable middle class living here in Benicia. My life is a testament that the American dream is attainable, and I'm here to dispel the myth that America is systematically racist. I stand here today ready to defend the country again from a very real threat, social Marxist indoctrination agenda known as CRT. As a man that is married to a Caucasian woman, and I have 2 half-white children, I am appalled that CRT is implementing the same oppressor/oppressed rhetoric, otherwise known as the proletariat and bourgeois rhetoric that Karl Marx once used, an ideology that has been used to divide and conquer formerly free nations. I'm here to stand up for those that may not have a voice in this debate. Instead of focusing resources on revisionist history, why isn't history taught without a political and ideological agenda? Why aren't we taught that slavery was prevalent everywhere in the world at the time of the birth of our nation, and it was across many different civilizations? A small minority of white people owned slaves in proportion to the size of the population. Why aren't our children taught that white Christian abolitionists led the anti-slavery movement that eventually led to other civilizations following suit? Why aren't our children taught to respect the 360,000 white Union soldiers that fought and died for everyone's freedoms? Why aren't our children taught that slavery is still practiced today in many places around the world, such as the Middle East and Africa today? Why are we heading down the same road of self-destruction I'm sorry, we are heading down the same road of self-destruction, and I would encourage everyone to study the dangers of Marxism and communism. 40 million Russian Christians were murdered by this is some history I believe we ought to, instead of teaching our kids CRT and applying resources to that, we should probably be teaching our kids the real history of communism. For example, 40 million Russian Christians were murdered by the Bolshevik regime between 1918 and 1950. 60 million Chinese civilians died during the cultural Marxist revolution of the 1950s. I'll end my speech with a quote. Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. Vladimir Lenin. And with that, I relinquish the board. I relinquish the mic.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to address you as Mario because I don't know your last name. Thank you for your comment. At this point, we're going to move on to our communications and informational items, which I think will be of great interest to you all. First is updates on new legislation, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Beatson, who's going to make a presentation and share some information with us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be back here, board. It's wonderful to be back here and sharing with you some new updates that have come to us in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to share this presentation with Miss Julie Corona as well. She will come in at the end and talk more specifically about independent study. Miss Martinez, this, I don't know if it's the angle. Let's see. So a couple of weeks ago, we received some new legislation, and there were 4 distinct parts. 2 different assembly bills passed, AB 104, which really talked about student retention, an option for pass, no pass on grading, and some potential exemptions for graduation requirements. And I will go through each of those. And then the second assembly bill, 130, is actually a trailer bill because that means it's built into the independent study legislation that previously existed, and it goes more in depth about independent study and the expectations for this school year. So the first part is retention. Assembly Bill 104 allows for parents and guardians of students that were enrolled during the last school year, kindergarten through 11th grade, to request retention for their children that had deficient grades for at least 1/2 of the grades on their transcripts. And so here are just the nuts and bolts of this particular component of this assembly bill. So deficient was defined as any students receiving D, Fs, and in terms of our elementary students, that would be a 1 on their report card. We need to have consultation meetings if parents request this option, and we review all learning recovery options, supports available. We look at data, social, emotional situation of the student and other information. We are required to review the retention research with parents, and that means, how successful retention practices are. And then at the end of the day, the LEA, us as the district, make the final decision about whether or not the student is retrained. It's not actually that much different than our current retention practice, but it is putting it out there that that is an option, especially the part about students having at least half of their grades in that deficient component. Oh, sorry, LEA is the local education agency, the district. And then the decision on that needs to be notified back to parents within 10 days. So another component of this assembly bill is a pass, no pass. And what it did allow us to do is for any high school students that were in school during the last school year, they could request by completing a form that was provided to us by the state for any grade to be changed from whatever the letter grade was to either a pass or a no pass marking on their transcript. The components on that really had to tell us that there can be no negative impact on their GPA. There are no limits to the numbers of classes that students could request this grade change for. And the other thing that was in the legislation was that the California state universities must accept pass, no pass without prejudice for students that were applying there. And that the CUs, the California state universities, were encouraged to do so, but not required. And that the CDE put out a survey to all universities, public and private, in the state of California and had to post a list, which is posted on their website. And we actually sent it out with this notification to parents so that they could make informed decisions about whether it was something they wanted to request for their students. And so parents have so the notification went out on July 30th. Parents have 15 days to make that request if they choose to do so. And then the district has 15 days to make the change and notify the parents that the change was made on their transcript. And just a little bit about why all of these came in, and it was really to help mitigate some learning loss or potential issues that students experienced last year with COVID, and trying to also, because every district in the state and actually across the United States had a little bit different return and what that looked like, trying to even some playing fields and provide some equity for our students. The final component of AB 104 is around graduation and some potential exemptions that are possible. And so this allowed for eligible high school students in their third or fourth year, so those are the students that were juniors or seniors last year, to who were not on track to graduate, to have all of the graduation requirements that are beyond the state graduation requirements exempt, and then provided some options for completing those state graduation requirements only. And that would be credit recovery, potentially retaking some of the classes that they failed, and potentially even going into a fifth year. So there were options for that. And sorry about that. And what I put up here for your viewing is just the difference between our current BUSD graduation requirements and what the state graduation requirements are. So the biggest difference is in BUSD, we require 4 years of English and the state requires 3. We also have 1 semester of Get Focused, and then we have the culminating number of credits are in the electives, whereas the state graduation requirements you can see on the right, there aren't that many. And so currently what our as our admin are coming back, what they're doing is looking with their counselors, they are reviewing transcripts and making lists of kids for whom this would apply. And before I turn this over to Ms. Corona, are there any questions on those 3 components of AB 104?
Maybe just to have a sense of board decorum, because we're coming back at it. You already filled out a card once, but maybe if you go to the podium and ask your question, but the board, we can answer your question, but we really dialogue.
Okay, go ahead, do whatever you want.
You can ask it.
I just didn't understand what I was, I kind of looked up all these acronyms and I didn't understand the last one, I was just wondering what it was.
Which was the
The L, was it?
LEA?
Yeah.
That stands for Local Education Agency, and really that means the district. Okay, thank you for and I have to remember to write those out on my slides. So that's a good reminder.
So many acronyms.
And then.
Um,
And so for this next piece of legislation, AB 130, which focuses on independent study, Ms. Corona is going to take us through that.
Before we go to Mrs. Corona, did any of the board have any questions for Dr. Beatson before we move on?
Actually, I do, and I'm not sure if you want to wait until the end, but I'm curious to know how many of our students what's the impact of the
Right, and so I don't have numbers yet, but I can come back to you with that for sure. They're just right now looking through, because everyone just came back, that's the students and what, who would qualify. They didn't feel like it was going to be a huge impact.
Thank you, Dr. Beetson. Mrs. Corona.
Good evening, trustees, Zeta, and governing board. Thank you once again for having me here. It's been a long time. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to give a brief overview of the new Assembly Bill of 130, talking about independent study. So this new Assembly Bill, it just talks about some of the changes and requirements that independent study and that school districts must abide by, and indicating what are the qualifications of students and when and why would students be eligible for request of independent study. So the new Assembly Bill 130 and the new requirements is that if a school district does not have an opportunity to offer independent study, it can partner with County Office of Education, and they can come with an agreement to provide that independent study. In this case, BUSD is providing independent study. We are not applying for a waiver, but that is part of the independent study new requirements. The reason why a school district would apply for a waiver if there's a financial hardship. There is a notification that had to go out to parents regarding independent study and the option that is available for parents to request independent study. This notification went out last week, and there's a request form on our website. Part of this requirement, the new requirement is that the parents have the right to request a conference to get questions answered when there's an enrolling process, to sign the agreement, and also the disenrolling. Some of the time frames for this has changed, and I'm going to go over that. There is also a requirement of synchronous, asynchronous time, and it's split between grade levels, and I'm going to review that shortly. Based on that, these requirements, we did have to update the board policy, so we have brought that forward, board policy and administrative regulations. Another piece that the requirement, I'm having a hard time breathing. Excuse me. Another piece.
If you were in class.
Yes. Another piece that there's a requirement is plan to transition students back within 5 days. So that pretty much explains that when a student is ready to transition back to the school district has to hold a meeting, and that they have to transition within 5 days.
Can I interject one thing as well? All of this came about to support students primarily that would be put at risk by coming back to in-person learning. So the legislation is really clear that we are back full-time in-person, and that virtual learning and distance learning, the way we've done it last year during COVID, is no longer an option to receive ADA. So this is a mitigating factor for students, and it's really supposed to be for students whose health would be put at risk by coming back in person. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. And that is part of the new updated board policy and the updated regulations with the changes. So basically, the new changes, here is the leveled synchronous and asynchronous requirements. It does split it. The K-3 requires the daily instruction, and then the 4-8 weekly synchronous instruction, and then there's daily check-ins. The daily check-ins can be done not necessarily by a certificated employee, but by a classified employee. And then there's the high school week synchronous instruction. And in right now, I'm going to review the times of the synchronous instruction for all the grade levels. There has to be a written agreement during that parent-teacher, the parent, student, and administrator conference. That written agreement has certain expectation, and it's written in the board policy. The daily communication of instruction has to be documented. We have to, as the district, we have to document and collect records of all that documentation and the assignments. There is a tiered level re-engagement plan that when there is an absence, there's 3 or more absences, the school has to continue the monitoring and make that contact with the families. We have a tier level engagement plan that we will be progress monitoring, and the teachers will be contacting the parents when there is the first absence or when there is a missed assignment. And the law is very clear. This specifically regarding special education and 504 is not new, but it does stress that students that have IEPs or have 504 plans, they shall not request independent study without prior the IEP meeting determining the eligibility and the need. The synchronous and asynchronous instruction for independent study, it only applies for those families requesting 15 days or more. That's more of the long term. Did I do that? Okay, so initially, Dr. Beatson had sent out a survey to families in BUSD, and 130 families indicated there was interest in applying for independent study. So currently, I briefly described the synchronous instruction, and these are the times that will be allotted for the kinder to 3rd grade. It's Monday through Friday, daily synchronous instruction for 90 days. For 90 minutes. And then they're using standard-based online program called Edgenuity. We currently have been using that with high school, but we have extended that all the way down to kindergarten. And students must plan on working during school hours on independent study. Assignments also have to be completed and turned in by the due date unless the teacher gives them another due deadline, but no more than 1 week later. For the 4th and 8th grade synchronous instruction, it is 60 minutes per week. There has to be daily check-ins, and this is where what I was referring to, that the check-ins does not necessarily have to be by the certificated teacher, but staff members have to do those daily check-ins with 4th through 8th grade. And they also use the same online program of Ingenuity, and the assignments is the same thing. There is a new updated in the board policy where it indicates no more than 3 missed assignments. If there is more than 3 assignments, the families would meet with the administrator and they would discuss what is in the best interest of the student if they were to return back to school. For the high school 9 and 12, the synchronous instruction is 60 minutes per week, and they're using the same online program, the Edgenuity, and the assignments is the same thing. I do have to say that our counterparts in Solano County, we are one of the few districts, I think the only district, if I may say, that we're offering for the synchronous instruction 90 minutes versus 30 minutes like other school districts in Solano County for the K-3 instruction. I think it is across the board that most of the districts are offering only 30 minutes of weekly instruction. As of yesterday, we had 33 requests for independent study. Some of those requests did involve students that have IEPs, but as I mentioned before, and when we go over the updated board policy and administrative regulation, I'm going to go over a little bit more about what the law says about students with IEPs requesting independent study. There is a big change. In the next slide, we have divided by grade level. So as of today, the numbers increased, but yesterday we had 33 students that requested independent study. These are the requests by grade level. First graders, it seems we don't have any requests. And then also we have requests by almost all the schools. I do have it divided by schools, by grade level. So we have a total of 33 as of yesterday. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, first of all, we talked Dr. Beatson, you talked about the need to show that your kid would be adversely affected, you had to fill out a form. Is there a teacher, a parent could not be rejected, correct?
That is
I mean,
correct.
if they feel like their kid would be put at harm, they
That-
don't have to show a doctor's note or anything else.
That is correct. The law says as determined by the parent.
And then I have a question too, and thanks for the information.
Yes.
In terms of the onboarding process for parents, so with Edgenuity, is there like an orientation for them and the students prior to them even engaging in the program? Because I understand that it can be very cumbersome and overwhelming. So what's the process for us engaging families so that they understand how to, how the kids log on and use it and everything?
So we have, by law, we have to have those conferences with the parents to answer any questions. But at the same time, when we sign those agreements, there's specific details that we have to have on those written agreements of the independent study, and that's where the administrator and the teacher of independent study with the family will review what the expectations, the login information will most likely be provided then, and if there's additional training that needs to happen, it will most definitely occur.
So it sounds like they just get the paper part but they don't actually log on at that moment. They just get the,
No,
Making
right
that-
now, the process, based on the law, we were supposed to notify parents. We notified parents. We created a independent request form, which was uploaded to our board policy. Thank you to Mikey. Uploaded to the website. Families have been emailing that request. That's how we got that tentative number of 33. From there, our administrator that oversees independent study, we are going to be calling parents and setting up those conferences to discuss whether they want to continue or if they have additional questions, and then we'll go from there in signing the written agreement and then walking them through the program.
So structurally, it seems to me we have 180% So structurally, it seems like a teacher is not going to deliver content because the program Edgenuity, because if I'm not mistaken, we have one teacher set up for all the kids. So that teacher more or less is going to have the position of checking in, making sure they can log on. If they have any questions in terms of the program, but the teacher's not going to be delivering content because no one person's going to deliver content from first grade through 12th grade.
There are specific requirements for the independent certificated employee. And one of those, and you're correct, the content is already in the online program in Edgenuity. It has all the subject matters. In addition to that, the teacher will make sure that the student is online. The synchronous instruction that happens with K3, that's on a daily basis, and that's where the teacher will go through the assignments, answer questions, and walk them through those assignments. It does decrease the time as the students get older in the 4th through 8th and then the high school. But you're correct, the teacher is monitoring and ensuring that there is that check-in also for those additional questions that the students might have.
Because, yeah, especially as you get up into the higher grades, I would assume that you might possibly have a teacher that could not answer content questions, that they would have to redirect the child back to the online program to get the information they needed. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the structure.
And the online program, just so you know, also, I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
I'm not.
It has videos, it has tutorials, it has all kinds of different modalities built into it as well.
Cool.
It is already A to G approved, so that's why we've always used it. We used to use Odysseyware. Edgenuity is sort of the more Cadillac version of Odysseyware, same company, that we've always used for credit recovery and independent study at the high school level before this new part of the legislation came through. So at the K3, which is daily, there may be some instruction, but most of the content will come from that program. And we're monitoring. Right now, we have a position posted. depending on how many more, we may need to adjust that. And so right now, we need to see how many kids and at what grade level spreads are they as we make the final decision on.
But the part that is beneficial that is with the Edgenuity program, it takes care of the situation where you have to have the teacher be the content provider. And how many teachers would be able to be content provider from first grade through 12th grade? So, okay,
And
thank
it
you very
could be,
much.
maybe like a tutorial in some places, but the major content and instruction you're.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Crona, and thank you, Dr. Beatson, for that information. We're going to move on to 8.2, first reading of the following board policy and the BPAR 6158 independent study. And Mrs. Crona, you are up again.
Thank you.
Glad you didn't leave.
I was about to, but Georgina stopped me. So these are, this is the policy update for independent study. And what we did is a lot of the information that I previously mentioned is in this policy and the requirements that needed to change in the policy. In addition to that, we made additional changes for the administrative regulation that you have in front of you. So one of the things that is pressing in this new requirement and is in the policy update, it's the satisfactory educational progress that needs to be determined based on the student's achievement and the engagement, also the completion of assignments, and the progress towards successful completion of the courses of study. And previously I had mentioned that students had to complete all assignments, and if they missed anything more than 3 assignments, that teachers and families would meet to ensure what is the best interest of the student, because the law did mention a little bit of falling behind. If you're missing 3 assignments and you have approximately a week to make up those assignments, the student will continue to fall behind. So obviously we're not waiting for the student to miss 3 assignments. There will be contact before. In addition to that, we do have that student, parent, guardian, educator conference, which I mentioned before, and it is to answer the questions, to go over the options that the families have, and anything that has to pertain to independent study. One of the things that the law indicates is that there has to be an agreement at least no later than 30 days of the first day of instruction. And that's a new piece in the board policy. In addition to that, we have the short-term independent study, which is a 2-prong. We have specific requirements for the 21-22 school year, and then the specific requirements, not necessarily specific requirements, but the other requirements that will be following the 2022, 23, and thereafter years in the district. So for the 2021-2022 school year, there is a short-term independent study, and it's between 3 to 15 days, and that's the change. The change used to, before we used to say 5 days, it got decreased to 3 days. Now, it can be for illness and medical. There was a slight change there. It used to be for vacation. It can no longer be for vacation. And this independent study is for grades TK to 12. So that hasn't really changed. It cannot be requested 15 days by the end of the school year or before the beginning of the school year. So if we are looking at a short-term independent study, we're looking at we cannot request those at the beginning and at the end of the school, 15 days before the end of the school year. Now, the short-term independent study for the following year of 2022 and 2023 and thereafter, it will change slightly to between 3 and 10 days. The only difference is that We kept the 3 days, which was the new requirement in the law, and we went back to the original independent study request that we had of 10 days. And it can only be requested for illness and medical, and not vacation. And also, it is available for TK to 12, and same regulations. It cannot be requested 15 days prior to the beginning of school or to the end of school. And the long-term independent study for the 2021, which is the requirement for this school year, nothing less than 15 days. And this is the major change. Independent study long-term is open to TK to 12. The change was that prior to this, it was only for high school students. Grades 9 to 12, it will change for the following years after this coming year, and it will go back to long-term independent study to be requested only for high school students, grades 9 to 12. So other things, and I've mentioned briefly, we have to have signed learning agreements on file. Every student that has requested independent study, we have to have those learning agreements. We also have to meet certain age requirements. The satisfactory educational progress needs to be evaluated if there's no progress being made. Also, the student should be referred to an alternative program or regular program if the student is not doing well and not making progress during independent study. There is that tier re-engagement strategies that will be used, the notification to parents that for lack of participation. So there's a twofold on this. There's the lack of participation and the lack of progress. So that's where the daily check-ins come in, and the progress monitoring will continue so families are notified, and especially when students are missing assignments. By the time they miss 3 assignments, we don't want to surprise the families and saying, by the way, we're considering of returning your child back to school. So there is going to be open dialogue and strategies implemented during that period to ensure we're providing those supports to the students. And there's the plan of outreach, which is that a continuous check-in. If needed, we need to referral to health or social services. That's also available. The conference will be to review the clear standards and the students' written agreement. And I did touch base on the students with disabilities. It indicates that the law, and this is not new in the law, it's been in the law before we have that, that students on IEPs, they shall not participate in independent study unless it is recommended by the IEP team. This district also needs to maintain a transition plan to return to in-person, and that cannot be done, that has to be done as soon as possible, no more than 5 days. And that's my third bullet. Summary of the district's policy procedures. We have, that's part of the learning agreement, and that's going to be in that master contract that we develop. Also, the duration of the enrolled courses, the expectations of each course. And then the statement of enrollment is an option. It needs to be known that independent study is voluntary. And that pretty much covers all of the changes of the board policy, the updates based on Assembly Bill 130. Do you have any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Corona, again for your great presentation. I'm sure that answered some questions out there, because there's still questions, so that probably did help quite a bit. And so thank you.
Thank you. And I do have to thank, many parents have just reached out and asked questions because it wasn't clear. They didn't have all of the information. So I encourage parents to continue emailing, and we will continue to answer all of those questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, next we're moving on to 8.3, update on the health and safety guidance for the 2021-22 school year. And we are going to ask Dr. Gill. Dr. Gill, there you are. I'm used to seeing you over here. Sometimes, I don't know. Anyway, hello, it's nice to see you, and if you wouldn't mind sharing your presentation with us regarding this.
Definitely, pleasure. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, President Zeta, trustees, superintendent cabinet, and community members who joined us today. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see everyone here together. So we are very excited to have our students and everybody back in person, keeping our fingers crossed. So that's why it's very important for us to be very conscious, follow health and safety guidelines. We are going to stick with the CDPH, which is California Department of Public Health guidelines, and also Solano County health guideline department guidance as well. And we will update these guidances and protocols as we receive new updates from them. So far, the current guidance is this, that indoors, everybody will be required to wear masks at school sites while kids are in class and so on. And if anybody who has any medical conditions, they will be exempted, but they still will need to wear a face shield with a drape and so on. And then outdoor masks are optional. Again, as of right now, the CDPH is not requiring inside classrooms any specific physical distance. They are saying, please wear masks, but they are not saying you need to have students sitting 3 feet or 6 feet, no guidance on that. And then there is specific requirements for ventilation. I do want to point out and thank our Director of Maintenance, Alfredo Romero. He's present with us today. And then also our District Health and Safety Coordinator, Terry Dean. They actually helped put this presentation and these guidelines together. And they're actually here in case any of us have specific questions regarding any of the areas they're in charge of. We are also requesting per CDPH guidelines that everybody who is, if you're sick, especially if you have COVID symptoms, please stay home. And the guidelines specifically say that you do not return until 24 hours have passed since the resolution of fever. If you had any other symptoms, they are improved. And then, or if somebody actually 10 days have passed, or somebody has received a COVID negative test, they can come back quicker, but they must have a negative test. Or if have medical documentation from the doctor saying their symptoms are not COVID related. Yes, sir.
So are we saying if someone is sick, either student or employee, do they have to get tested before? Because I look at the first one, says 24 hours have passed, fever, other symptoms have improved. 10 days, I mean, are these choices, or if you're sick, do you have to go get a COVID test?
Ms. Dean may be able to.
Fine, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. That's why I asked.
It's confusing, and I think as she goes through the whole presentation, it'll be less clear. No, I'm kidding. It is confusing. The overall goal is to keep school open. That's what we really want to do. So we encourage anybody who's sick to please don't come to school, period. If you're having COVID symptoms, they're not all so specific anymore, as we all know. We encourage people to go get a test. If you don't want to get a test, you certainly don't have to. But again, we ask that you don't return to school, or CDPH and the CDC guidelines say, please don't come back for 10 days if you're home ill and you don't really want to get a test, or you don't have underlying health conditions that may easily be clarified of what your illness may be. So you can go to the doctor, say, okay, I'm sick, I'm going to go to Kaiser the next day, and your physician says, you know, this is related to your underlying health condition. You can return to work or school as long as you don't have a fever or continue to have symptoms, and you don't need a COVID test. And we accept that, and you can come back to school.
Right before that, say, though, that if you're sick, you should stay home 20 days.
If you're having COVID-specific symptoms and you don't want to go to the doctor, you don't want to get a COVID test, the CDC and the CDPH, the guidelines we have to follow are we ask you to stay out for 10 days to ensure that you unknowingly don't have COVID and may spread it to people in school, which would then potentially make them sick. Is that clear?
It's clear, but it sounds voluntary. Am I correct in that assumption?
So, well, there is certainly that piece
No
of it.
one's gonna-
I mean, we are no longer, there's no longer pre-screening requirements. And so, yes, we ask employees, students, and family, please not to send your student home sick. Now, we all know parents sometimes, their kid looks fine. They get them ready to go, they go to school, and of course, they get a call saying your kid is not fine. In those cases, they will get specific instructions based on what's happening with the student at school. But we ask the same for employees. So if you go home from school and say you're experiencing specific COVID symptoms, we would ask you to follow, we are required to ask you to follow those guidelines, yes. But again, many people, if you go to Kaiser and they say, no, this is something else, then you can certainly, show that note and then you could return.
Okay, but I mean, like you said, there's no pre-screening. There's no, hey, you were out on Tuesday. I'm sorry. You were out Tuesday. You're back Thursday, and we don't see anything. You were out Tuesday and Wednesday. You just came back on your own Thursday, and we don't see anything.
There is a process, though. There's a process for employees who need a sub, and there's a process for kids who call in sick to school. So those are tracked through the clerical people at the sites. They would say, so we are being very specific. So if a kid went home sick, they would have instructions similar to what I just explained, asking a parent, what to do, and would outline those. We have a form for parents to take home, which clearly spells out what the requests are for them to do. And if a teacher calls in sick, HR would explain to them, please don't come back if you're sick, and they would be given that information as well.
Okay, so we are going to keep track. So
Yes.
some kid can't be out Tuesday, come back Thursday, and just slide under the radar, and whatever happens, happens.
Right, and we know those teachers are really good about who's been out, and people have been a little more vigilant now and knowing somebody's gone, and so yes, we have been closely monitoring that when we came back after spring break. If a student was sent home, we had a spreadsheet, so we were tracking closely.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is that okay? You can go
Thank you,
ahead.
Ms. Dean. Yes. You may have to come back. So this is another part that Ms. Dean will be leading, which is per assembly bill from 86. This is actually from even before, from 2021 school year, that we will still be doing contact tracing, we'll still be keeping track, and then also if there are any positive cases, informing employees, health department, Cal OSHA, union presidents, parents as applicable, and so on. COVID testing, as Ms. Dean mentioned, we advised everyone to get tested when they have symptoms. And employees specifically, if they get tested, let's say after work hours, they will get paid up to 2 hours for testing on a timesheet. Or if they get testing done during work hours, they will not be charged sick leave up to 2 hours. So that provision is there. And if the test is not free, because we know many of the tests are free these days or insurance covers them, but for whatever reason, if the test is not free, insurance doesn't cover it, we will reimburse the employee as long as we receive documentation for that test. Quarantine, so it's different from the springtime. So now CDPH is saying if somebody is vaccinated but asymptomatic, they do not need to quarantine and no testing is required. Again, that's guidance as of right now. Who knows, it might change tomorrow, right? Because things are changing. If somebody is unvaccinated but masked, in a situation where there is a positive COVID case around them, and they can attend school if they are asymptomatic. They will need to continue to get masked. They will need to get tested twice weekly. They'll need to quarantine from extracurricular activities, including sports. Now, if somebody does not want to get tested twice weekly, then they must quarantine. Finally, if somebody is unvaccinated and unmasked, and when we talk about mask, we will be reinforcing it like crazy. We'll continue our best to make sure everybody's wearing their mask properly, right? That is a huge thing, is, nose is covered, mouth is covered, so that mask is fully effective. That, again, that's based on science, right? That's what our understanding is. That if the close contact with the unmasked case, the positive person is unmasked, then they must quarantine for 10 days or 7 days if they receive a negative test after 5 days of exposure. And Ms. Dean can explain this further if needed. Basically, if somebody gets exposed today, they get tested tomorrow, they might actually be negative tomorrow, but their negative test has to be 5 days after the exposure because it takes time for it to develop. And then the test could be PCR antigen test and so on. And then CDPH also has these guidelines specifically for hygiene, cleaning, food service, and COVID safety plan, reinforcing hand washing and using sanitizer, cleaning classrooms and other spaces, disinfecting if there are any positive cases, and then food service. They're saying that we should try our best as much as possible to have the students sit as much further apart from as possible while eating, because they can't really wear masks when they're eating, and also provide outside spaces for students to eat so that they can spread out as much as possible. So that is something we're going to be working with our school sites. And then we are also going to be working on a COVID-19 safety plan. We had one in the spring. They called it COVID-19 prevention program at that time. Now it's the terms get back and forth, the same exact thing, but based on the new guidelines, it will be tweaked a little bit depending on the these guidances that we will be posting on our website, sharing with staff and parents. Volunteers and visitors. Again, the guidance is that we limit non-essential volunteers and visitors. Now, if there's any essential visitors who need to go to school for whatever reason, we are going to allow them, but non-essential visitors should be limited. It is again a requirement that everybody wear masks. They should check their symptoms, like we are asking students and staff to check symptoms. Same thing with visitors and volunteers. And then anybody who provides volunteers and direct service providers, meaning volunteers, if somebody volunteers in a classroom, we are going to be requiring them to show their vaccination. So when the schools are going to be working on allowing volunteers, there is that part on the form that says that they will need to check their vaccination card and document that. And same thing with the direct service providers. And then wearing masks and checking for symptoms. And let me clarify the difference between visitors and volunteers here. Visitor might be a person who is just coming to pick up their child. They're going to be in the office for 2 minutes maybe. A volunteer may be in a classroom person working, helping students, helping the teacher for like an hour or 2 or something like that. So that's a huge difference. School-wide events, again, as of right now, the guidance says that anytime there is any indoor school-sponsored events on campus or off campus, everybody must wear masks. Outdoors masks are optional. And parent meetings can be held virtually as long as parent is in agreement. So school sites specifically will work with parents on those based on the parents' desires and needs and so on. And as of right now, our guidance is that back to school night will be conducted virtually, similar to last year. And we will revisit these protocols quarterly, if not sooner. And that's the guidance, public health guidance.
Thank you, Dr. Gill. Yeah, can you please fill out another card and bring it up if you'd like to speak? Oh, you're Mario. Okay, please.
official death count? We don't know.
Oh, no.
Under 400. Okay, out of a population of hundreds of thousands. Show of hands, does anyone else feel like these rules are draconian and a little absurd? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And last I checked, I don't think there is a PCR test that can tell the difference between the Delta variant and the regular variant. So, as far as we know, COVID is COVID. And last time I checked, COVID has a 99% survivability rate.
99.98.
Yeah. So, you know.
Mario,
What do
did you
you-
have a question that you wanted to ask? Because of
Okay,
your
yeah, no, fair question.
making
Don't
statements.
you think that this is a little bit insane considering that we have a 99.9% survivability rate with COVID? Anyone? Isn't not a little insane? 99.9%. And we don't even know how many people, kids have died of this. This is causing so much psychological problems with our children that far exceeds this COVID. I relent the mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gill. Any of my colleagues have any questions? Mrs. Furchi?
One of the things I'm a little bit perplexed about. Oh, thank you, Dr. Moss. One of the screens I'm a little bit perplexed about is the quarantining. I'm not clear. My understanding is that is no longer part of the California Public Health, the CDC. So can you talk me through that a little bit and explain why we're doing this? Because the reality is you're unvaccinated are our students. Middle school on down, there's no vaccine for them. And so I'm concerned about the strict guidelines that we're putting into place as well.
We're using are required to open school. So it's not a district choice. If we want to open school, these are the requirements we need to do, just to clarify that. But what it's called now is that parents have the option, for instance, it's called a modified quarantine. So if you had a positive case in a class, or your child was in that classroom or exposed to close contact, and that still is because everybody's in the same classroom, for instance, they're all at a closer distance now, they're all masked. But maybe if they had something beyond that just in the classroom time and they were contact traced to be considered a close personal contact, you now have the option not to have to stay home. So you're right in that sense that there is no quarantine. But if your child develops symptoms, then they would be required to stay home and quarantine at home if they were considered ill. So they can stay in school. They can't play extracurricular activities at that point because if they're potentially sick. And you have the option to get them tested if they want to be tested. You have the option to take them to the doctor. Again, the same thing we went over before. And if the doctor says, I feel like this is not related to COVID or whatever, and they have a cold or something, another diagnosis, they have strep throat, and they can come back when they're not symptomatic. That's optional too. So I don't know if that helps you much, but it is an optional quarantine or a modified quarantine. Technically, the only people that need to quarantine are positive cases, confirmed positive cases. So that's the goal, again, is to keep kids in school. But if there's a known case, we have to follow the CDPH and the state guidelines to help mitigate the spread. We are required to do that.
Yeah, that's what I think Dr. Gill mentioned that earlier, that she's really speaking to this 3-page guidance that we put together, really just following CDPH. Mm-hmm. And so the language that you see in this is really just sort of verbatim out of their recommendations to school sites for requirements to start.
I am going to say this, and I know I am in agreement with everyone of my colleagues on the board, but honestly, I got a vaccine because I felt it was important. I got a vaccine. Thank you. I went and sought out a vaccine because I felt like it was the responsible thing to do. And because I've done that, and my husband falls into that concerned category, I feel like we're safe. And I feel like when he needs to, he masks up. But I feel like we have not gotten out from under COVID. I think this is excessive. I just do. The fact that I'm wearing a mask and I'm vaccinated, I don't need to wear a mask. But I am, because I'm trying to be respectful of my colleagues and of the people in the room. I don't know who is vaccinated or who is not. I have been going places. I have been on vacations. I have been with large crowds. I've been doing this since I've been vaccinated in February. We know our children are not caring. Every scientific study has proven that. I'm just really concerned that we're going to bring little ones back to school. And I know the state is saying it, so I mean, it's just, they're the ones I'd like to have the lecture with. But it's like, they're going to put little kids in masks. We know it's not good for them emotionally, psychologically, learning-wise. Little kids need this off so you could see my face, and that you can learn and you could see the emotional reaction I'm having.
Diane, I would really appreciate you keeping your mask on.
I am keeping it on. I just
Okay.
demonstrated.
But you did it several times, and I'm sorry if you disagree.
Sherry,
However, this is a
my
state
point
guidance.
is, I think I made my point. My point is,
You did.
I think this is excessive and extreme.
This is state guidance, and we have to follow the rules that the district has agreed to follow, and it's not us that created it. So with that being said, that's where we're at with masks.
These are going to be the rules that we have, and let's move on.
And I will accept them and I will support them, but I just need you to know I do not support them and approve.
Okay.
Just so you know, Diane, or Ms. Ferrucci, I'm sorry, there may be updates in November anticipated. So they're looking at, let's just try to get kids back. I think that's the overall goal. And I think everybody wants that for sure. And so schools, they tell us, we have to do this to get the kids back. So we're doing this to get the kids back. Hopefully by the end of November, the plan is the CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, and everybody else is supposed to look at what's working and can we reduce or get rid of some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's hope that this can change and things will be more favorable for people, and that we won't need to have all these mitigation practices. But at this time, I think it's just what we have to do, and that's just what it is, so we can get everybody started again.
And again, Terry,
Yeah,
I
I know.
respect that and I approve that, and I will do whatever is needed to get our children in school. But I just think personally, I'm just letting you know, I don't agree with them.
Okay.
Sure.
So,
Okay, but I know we're accepting it, I know we're
Yeah.
doing it, and that's gonna be the voice that comes from me.
Thank you, Mrs.
I think the
Ferrucci.
point's been made, so let's move on.
We're going to move on. Did anybody else have any questions on the board?
No.
Who? Who? Oh, sir, if you would fill out a card, I can't see you, but you're my blind vision. If you'd fill out a card and hand it to Mrs. Martinez, we'll definitely take your question or comment. But did anybody else on the board have anything to ask of Dr. Gill or Terry Dean? Or did we pretty much get that covered? I think we're good. Okay, so you might want to come up to the podium, please.
I have a question.
Mr. Graves, thank you.
Yeah, who and how would that be enforced? I mean, wintertime, everyone's going to have cold and flu symptoms.
Mhm.
Are they going to be reported? Are classmates going to report them? Are teachers going to be responsible? And what will be the protocol from removing them from that environment? I mean, that can have some emotional impact too on the kids when they get dragged out, or kids start saying, well, Johnny's got it, Susie has it, I don't want to sit here.
But they
Report 'em,
would-
let's get them out of here. That's it. That's going to be tough.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comment. Okay, we're going to move on to our last item of this evening. 8.4 is the budget update for the 2021-22 state adopted budget. And Mr. Rayhill, welcome. You're up.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening. So the state adopted its budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which started July 1st, ends next June 30th. And as we presented before school was out, the governor comes out with the projected May revise every year. And then the state assembly and Senate, they take a look at it and work with the governor to sign a budget by the end of June, which is what they did. And for the most part, the state adopted budget that was adopted at the end of June is basically the same as the May revise with just a few changes. And so I'll highlight those changes. During the COVID and during the fiscal year, the state was planning on issuing IOUs to the schools and other agencies for their funding. And through the budget, those have all been removed. And so the state is going to be paying us monthly now, as they have in the past. There is a few IOUs that they're going to make good in August. So here we are in August right now. So by the end of this month, they should be all caught up with their payments to our school district. In the May revise, every year the state provides for a cost of living adjustment, which was in the May revise at 5.07%. And that exact percentage was what was included in the state adopted budget. So we put our school budget together based on that 5.07%, and that's what ultimately got adopted by the state. There was a slight relief in the unemployment insurance, which was a reduction. It was originally estimated at 1.23%, and that's been reduced down to 0.5%. So we'll reflect those savings in our next budget update. An upcoming program, we've heard about programs for preschool and younger students over the years, and I would say that this state adopted budget has put more money towards making that a reality, and we'll be bringing back more information to the school board and to the community about what they're calling universal transitional kindergarten, universal TK. So it looks like within the next 4 or 5 years, by the 2025-26 school year, all 4-year-olds will have access to what they're calling transitional kindergarten. We have that now for those students who turn 5, between September and December. There's some exact dates, but every year over the next 5 years, the date is 2 months longer. And so by 2025-26, all 4-year-olds in California will be able to attend public transitional kindergarten. So we're all used to having, the 5-year-olds, about 5-year-olds attend kindergarten. We've transitioned with this small group of kids that qualify for TK, and now we'll be benefiting from universal TK over the next several years. So more information to come. We'll be getting that information out to the community and our families as that becomes available. Good news on student meals. During the COVID year, both the feds and the state provided funding for any student who wanted a free meal, a free breakfast, a free lunch to come and pick those up. And that has been extended into this upcoming fiscal year. So this coming school year, all students, any student, will be able to get a free breakfast and a free lunch every day of school. So during COVID, during the last year, The district was able to provide free meals for the weekends and holidays too. That part has not been extended into the school year. But all 180 student days for that coming up, the kid comes, they'll ask them to sign up, and they'll be able to get a free breakfast and a free lunch every day of school. And that appears to be ongoing funding. And so not only will that happen next year, but at this point in time, it's scheduled to continue ongoing. So that's really good news on that front. The state continues to dedicate monies towards career technology education programs, and the high school has been developing, they call that CTE, Career Technology Education. They've been developing their program over the years, and it was based on year-to-year funding, and that has now been turned into ongoing continuous funding. And so we can bring back more information on the career tech education programs at the high school. I'll give you an update on all the wonderful things they're doing in those programs. The state also created an additional grant program when it adopted the state budget in June, and it has a similar name. It's called the Expanded Learning Program Opportunity, but it's a different funding source. And what they're really asking districts to do is work with within its own program and do some outreach to the community and provide additional after-school programs. And so Dr. Beatson and Ms. Regis and myself, we're going to be meeting and talking to some community groups, including the city of Benicia, and see what type of expanded learning programs we can offer both before and after school. There's a lot of requirements that are attached to it, but once we meet, I have a pretty good sense that we'll be able to meet the requirements and get the funding to implement those. And those are the highlights from the state adopted budget.
Thank you, Mr. Rayhill.
Sure, I have a question for Mr. Rayhill.
Yes.
Tim, I was reading through some of this as well. Did they talk at all about the impact of universal kindergarten, like on our preschool programs?
They haven't really addressed that point, and obviously, if those 4-year-olds are now going to be attending transitional kindergarten, they won't be enrolling in the preschool programs like they have in the past. And things that we're seeing with the universal transitional kindergarten program is that it pretty much follows whatever you do for kindergarten, you have to do for the transitional kindergarten. So it would be the same, like 5-hour day. So it would maybe not eliminate the preschool, but it would drastically change who preschool serves. And if you kind of just think of it, the only additional group they could serve would be younger kids.
Right.
They'd have to go into more 3-year-olds. Possibly, I think the cutoff is in 2 years plus 8 or 9 months. So I mean, it just kind of gets younger and younger with the kids that are served in programs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other colleagues have anything that they would like to ask Mr. Rayhill? No, and I saw somebody come up with I thought it was a question. Ms. Hart, thank you.
I'd just like to thank all of you for all the efforts that you have done. I know it hasn't been easy to take care of all the kids, the staffs, the teachers. I know you've spent an enormous amount of time on all of the procedures and so forth. What I'd like to know is, what are you doing to help them to be healthy? I see a lot of, we're going to lock them down, we're going to keep them apart, we're going to do this and that. But I don't hear a lot about how we're going to help teachers, staff, and students with their own immune system. and teaching them some more healthy behaviors. Do we have anything in place? Is there anything designed for that?
Yes. Yeah, we have systems in place that will be supporting kids and staff, and we don't view kids coming back as lockdown. And I mean, we have a lot of systems in place to help
Well, I
them out.
think
One
if
of the things
we're-
we were able to do last year, this district received, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million to address issues that presented themselves potentially in kids when they were home for 14 months, whether it's academic or social emotional. So we've added positions, we have curriculum materials, we're looking at social and emotional support for students. So we're very much mindful, great point, we're very mindful of that, and we think we have good systems in place to help our kids when they come back.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
And we have another question. Mr. Graves?
Yeah, I hate to backtrack, but I didn't hear a response. I'm really curious, what is the protocol gonna be if kids present with symptoms? Does anybody have an answer?
Yeah, but I don't know the procedure, if I have to wait till you're finished and then I come up and address that, but I certainly can.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sure. Now, this question specifically is, we have aggressive.
I think,
this
just for
okay,
a
or
point
should
of
I-
order, Misty, I really would like you to do this. This is, we're, back at it, and this is also new to us, and we're learning. Let's get real with each other. Obviously, we're learning every day new things about the virus and how to deal with it. So it's typically at board meetings, we don't have the sort of a back and forth exchange like this. However, this is new, this is very important, and we want to make sure that we're as clear as we can be on all of this, so we don't afford an opportunity for Ms. Dean to answer your good questions. So I just wanted to point that out just as we go forward, because it would be hard running a board meeting like this in the future. But go ahead, thanks.
And just, I'd like to say too, that if anybody has any specific questions, you can always call and email me. I'd be glad to take the time to clarify things, because I really do think it is hard to clarify everything in a nutshell. There may be some very specific things, but we are required to go through rigorous contact tracing. That started last year for the district. And anybody with a positive COVID test, whether it's a student or staff, it's all confidential information. It would never be shared with other students or staff for that purpose. But I don't know if you heard the first part of the presentation about what we're doing for the quarantine or the voluntary quarantine when kids are sick and what the procedures were. Did you get to listen to that? Okay. So my understanding is your question is specific to if there's a sick student in the classroom or if somebody goes home sick, or is that it? Okay, so if somebody goes home sick at school, first of all, if a student presents with any kinds of symptoms, they are isolated, they go to the office. There's no more isolation rooms per se like we had to have last year, but the parent is notified right away, and we again are asking this year that somebody be available in the day to pick the student up so they don't hang out for a long time. They would call the office and say, or to send the sick kid down, or if they're at recess or wherever they might be, and a yard duty notices the kid seems not to feel well, they would take them to the office. The parent would be notified. The office staff is good. They would take their temperature. They would find out what is the symptoms. I mean, there's going to be situations a kid has a headache in the morning because they didn't eat breakfast. So we're trying to really differentiate. And again, there's protocols in place for that based on last year. A student staff decision tree, 6 student symptoms. Did they have a simple headache? And if they do, and it's just a question of maybe they didn't eat breakfast and the headache resolves in 10 minutes, we're not going to make that kid go home right at that moment. Now, if they present with several symptoms and they're vomiting, they have a headache, they have specific symptoms, there's a next criteria that, yes, we need that student to go home because whatever it is, whether it's COVID or something else, they need to be evaluated, and they can be evaluated medically through their healthcare provider. Again, there's all those options that we give parent and explain that when their child is picked up, which we haven't always done in the past, but this is very specific to COVID.
So is it prerogative of the teacher, another student, come to the teacher classmate demonstrating symptoms?
So if Johnny's sitting next to you and says, you look, or whatever happens, we wouldn't base it on the other kid's assessment. No, we would base it on what the office staff and the adults are seeing in the kid, whether they had actual symptoms of fever or other things going on. So in general, other kids don't report it unless it's something really obvious where a kid is thrown up next to them or something where they can't avoid it. But in general, we follow all the contact tracing reporting guidelines that we have to now that the state has implemented, and we do that, and it's all a medical illness like the COVID is a HIPAA violation, and we can't tell anybody about what's going on or what that student has, whether it's mono or anything else. We don't share that information. Now, we don't have control necessarily if a parent wants to tell all their friends or say, hey, my kid has this. That's their prerogative. We don't have any input in that. But in general, if a student is absent, and other students would not know why they're absent. Again, unless a parent or somebody else identified an issue with the student. So we really stick to that.
If the child comes home and reports a classmate being ill, and they're suspicious, the parent is responsible to contact the school nurse or teacher, and then who will carry out that contact tracing?
Well, contact tracing is for positive COVID cases. So the health department is required. For instance, a parent is concerned, they take their kid to the doctor says, I recommend your student have a COVID test. And the parent and the doctor make that decision whether they want their student to have a COVID test. We don't require a COVID test to return to school. So they decide to do that if they're suspicious and it's positive. The parent would then it would be recommended that the parent tell the school that, because the student would be absent. And most parents, in cases where we've had students who are ill with anything, most parents will call the school and report it, but the school does not tell anybody else except one specific person who does the contact tracing through the health department. We are required to report that case to the health department. That's a requirement through CDPH. That we have to do that. Now, if we don't get any information, there are occasions where I will get calls from the health department myself only as a healthcare provider, that the health department is required to say, you have a positive outbreak of any reportable condition, because that is a legal requirement for CDPH to do that. So if we had an outbreak of anything, whether it's COVID or meningitis or something else, that we would have to do that. We would have to notify families or people of an outbreak per guidelines, but we never identify any student who it is.
You don't identify it, but if a child comes home and says, my classmate is several feet away from me, demonstrating symptoms of COVID, what's the parent?
Well, if the parent had concerns or questions about a sick student at school, they should call the school. They can talk to the principal. They can talk to me. They can talk to somebody else, because sometimes kids don't have accurate information. So anytime a parent has questions or concerns about something a child has reported, I always recommend that they call to get clarity with the school administrator to find out exactly what's going on. Is that helpful?
Well, that's still not the protocol.
Ms. Dean?
Yes.
I want to thank you for all the information that you're
Sure,
sharing.
sure.
There will be more information on the website. It's being changed daily sometimes. So I welcome you to reach out to Ms. Dean via an email, sir, or make a phone call, and she'll be happy to go over some more information for you. But thank you so much again for helping explain. And at this time, I would like to thank everybody for being here, also being out in the web world. And we are looking forward to having everybody back in classes within a couple of weeks, I guess. It's very exciting. And we look forward to seeing you all during the year.
August 17th.
August 17th. Thank you. I'm going to close this meeting tonight of our special board meeting at 7:35. Thank you.